and we're rolling along through Revelation. And we just got done with the trumpet judgments. And one thing about the trumpet judgments is that they were limited in scope. It seems like it was always a third of the world that was affected. It was usually a third of the world that was affected in the trumpet judgments. And after the trumpet judgments, there are several things that are going on. And that's where we're looking at right now. We're going up towards the bowl judgments, which are the final judgments from God on the earth before he returns. And we're in chapter 14, starting out in chapter 14. And the very first part of chapter 14 talks about the 144,000 again. We've talked about them once before already. And we know that they are Jews. And they think there are 12,000 from each of the tribes of Israel that are involved. That they have kept themselves pure. And that they are Christian Jews. Okay, they're all Christian Jews. And they're preaching the gospel. Okay, through this time of the Great Tribulation. This tells us a little bit more about them. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. His name, Jesus Christ, and the Father's name, God the Father. Okay, and I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters and like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of harpists playing their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except for the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. It starts out and it looks like where they are is on Mount Zion. Now, where is Mount Zion? Okay, that's Jerusalem, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. That's Mount Zion, and so we're not looking at this. It's the one thing to think about it. It doesn't seem like this is chronological, okay, because Jesus is with the 144,000 there on Mount Zion, and we know as we're stepping through things, Jesus has not returned yet to Mount Zion, but that's his relationship. It shows the relationship between him and the 144,000. They stay with him all the time. And then it seems like we go back up into heaven because we're at the end where they sang a new song before the Lord and before the throne. It seems like that's the throne in heaven, and the 144,000 are there singing to him a song only that they can learn. They have a special relationship with Jesus Christ. So, and the last part of that, these are those who did not defile themselves with women, or for they remain virgins. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and they were purchased from among mankind and offered as first fruits to God and to the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. Several things here that are interesting that I hear. I've heard people say that it seems to say that they are men in the Bible. They're all men. They're not. They're not both sexes, but they're all men. The other thing, of course, some people say, well, it just means that they have not committed adultery or anything like that. When it says this, that they could be married, they could be, but that's not what it says. It says pretty specifically that they've never been with women. So it's, and then I've had other people that have said, well, that has nothing to do with their physical relationships with people. That's about their spiritual relationship with God, and that's what I've been told as well. And it's something to think about. It seems to me to be pretty specific about it, but it's something to think about. But these 144,000 are a special group of Jewish people that have been going all around the world preaching the gospel to people everywhere, not just to Jews, but to everybody. And they are part of the reason that there is this revival that's going on in Israel, and people are coming to Christ during this time. Okay, now the other thing that it talks about them as being offered as first fruits to the Lamb. And if you remember what first fruits are, basically it is all of the harvest that is brought in, the very first and the best of the harvest is brought in and given to God. And that's called the first fruits. And I think that what we're going to see later on in this chapter, in just a couple more things, we're going to see a harvest, okay, that's going to be made. It's going to be made by Jesus Christ. And I think that what they're talking about with the first fruits here is that harvest. That they are the first fruits of that harvest that happens at the time of the end, in the Great Tribulation, okay? Because I believe that we as Christians, the church, have already been taken up into heaven, and we're participating in the marriage supper of the Lamb, and we are already there while all these other things are happening here on earth. But there are going to be a lot of people becoming Christians during this time, and these people are the first fruits of that harvest on the earth. Okay. Let's read Revelation 14:6-8. And I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who has made the heavens, the earth, and the sea, and the springs of water." A second angel followed and said, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries." And then a third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or their hand, they too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb, and the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. There will be no rest day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, or for anyone who receives the mark of his name." This calls for patient and endurance on the part of the people of God, who keep his commands and remain faithful to Jesus. Then I heard a voice from heaven say, "Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them." This is going to be a very difficult time for Christians during the Great Tribulation. They're going to be actively being pursued by the global government at the time. We say it's a global government, and the Antichrist seems to have been given power over just about all of the world. At the very end, we're going to find that there are kings of the East that come, and they actually seem to be fighting as well. And so it's a lot of theologians don't know whether it's going to be that the government has the global government that is under the Antichrist is just most of the world, and then there's also China and the countries that are under its dominion. and they're opposed to each other, or we don't know if they're allied together or what's going on. But God does say in Revelation that He gives the whole world under the government, basically, or the authority of the Antichrist. So, but Christians at this time are going to be persecuted greatly, and that's why he says it calls for persecution. So it's a bit of a I don't know, you could almost call it a requiem. Those that rest from their labor, those are the ones that are killed during this time. Okay, the first angel, he proclaims the gospel all over the world. And it's a last hope of the fallen world. He warns them that from this time that God's judgment is all that's left. Okay, judgment's coming. Okay, and now you need to. And it's interesting. Would we listen to a heavenly messenger coming and flying all over the world, telling the gospel of Christ? We all throughout Revelation we see blatant spiritual and supernatural activity that's going on by God to show the world exactly who He is, but still people refuse to believe. And this is the first angel is planting seeds for another harvest, calling people to believe in Jesus Christ, giving the gospel, the same gospel that we give here. Okay, same thing, but it's the last chance for the people of the world to believe. And then the second angel comes behind and talks about the fall of Babylon the Great. We're going to look at another chapter or two on Babylon the Great as well. And so we'll need to learn a little bit about what Babylon the Great is. Babylon, of course, was a city that was the capital of the Babylonian Empire. And it is presently in ruins, okay, and has been for 2,000 years, okay, almost. And it's in the desert, and you can go there, and you can go through the ruins if you want to. So most people do not believe that Babylon the Great in Revelation is the same city of Babylon that is in present-day Iraq, okay? They believe that it is a city, the city where the Antichrist makes his government. In fact, the Antichrist seems to build the city himself or remodels the city to his liking because he has taxes and everything else coming in from all over the world. So he's got lots of money, and this is his capital city. And it's known here in Revelation as Babylon the Great. There are some other clues that are given about its which city it is on earth. And we'll see those soon. But it's a place of decadence. It's a place where all the rulers of the world come to talk with the Antichrist, and everybody else comes to party, basically. And it caters to that kind of thing. And the angel is warning that it's going to be destroyed shortly. Okay, we saw last week, we talked about the mark of the beast, we talked about the Antichrist, and that mark basically is a symbol that people are taking, saying that they worship the Antichrist, that they revere him as their God, okay? And the people that do not take the mark can't buy and sell. They can't do any kind of economic transactions in general. And we can say that it has to do with, today's modern technology with microchips, or they even have tattoos that you can do this with now. Or It's just a symbol that they have that lets everybody know that there's somebody that you can deal with. Whereas if you don't have that symbol on you, on your head or on your hand, then if you don't have that symbol, then normal people will refuse to do business with you. Okay, you're just marked because of your unmarkedness. So either one of those makes sense. The technology is there for either one. Okay. But there's a warning here. The second angel is definitely saying that if you take and you make the decision to take the mark of the beast, you are making a decision against worshiping Christ. Okay? And so definitely if you take the mark of the beast, then you will not be making it living with God in heaven. The next part of 14, the last part of 14 is interesting. There are actually two different parts of it, and there's two different harvests that are taking place. And these are, some people think that they're very symbolic. Other people say that it's the specific time where this is happening. And let's read that. Okay. I looked, and there before me was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like the Son of Man, with a crown of gold on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. And another angel came out from the temple and called in a loud voice to him who was sitting on the cloud, "Take your sickle and reap, because the time to reap has come, for the harvest of earth is ripe." And so he who was sitting on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. And then the next part of it, another angel came out of the temple in heaven. He too had a sharp sickle. Still another angel who had charge of the fire came from the altar and called in a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, "Take your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grapes from the earth's vine, because the grapes are ripe." The angel swung his sickle on the earth, gathered its grapes, threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath, and they were trampled in the winepress outside the city. Blood flowed out from the press, pressing as high as the horses' bridles for a distance of 1,600 stadia, which is about 180 miles. Okay. So we've got two different harvests going on here, and they're two different things. The first harvest is by the Son of Man, who is Jesus Christ. Okay, he's wearing the crown. Since the title of the world has been opened and he has been given ownership of the world, he is preparing to come back. Okay, and so the symbology here, to me, is if you go back to the beginning, it talks about the first angel going around the world at this time, proclaiming the gospel. People come to Jesus Christ at this time through that angel's gospel. Okay? And what Jesus is doing is he is harvesting those people from off the earth. Okay? Is it another is it a secondary rapture? I don't know. Is it their souls being brought up because they've been killed, because they've been persecuted? It may be that as well, okay? But he's getting the souls that belong to him off of the earth, okay? And they're being brought up to heaven. And I think it goes with what the angel did. And the interesting word, there are two different words for the sickle that is used. We use sickle for both of them here in English, but actually there are two different instruments. The one that Jesus Christ has when he's in the cloud and he harvests the earth is a wheat scythe. Okay? That's what the Greek is for it. It's a wheat scythe. And harvesting the wheat, the grain. Okay?
And many times you see the Grim Reaper with that.
Yeah.
He has that.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. The scythe. Now the other one, the angel that comes out and has a sharp sickle, he has a grape pruning sickle. It's a hook knife that you cut grapes off of a vine. And so they're two different instruments. It's just not specified in English when it's translated. But what he does is he cuts all the grapes off the vine, throws them into the grape press, and they are crushed. And this is symbology of a different type of harvest. This is not a harvest of the Christians from the earth. This is the harvest of the people that have refused Christianity, and they're crushed under God's wrath. And now that the word that they use for the blood flowed out of the press, rising as high as the horses' bridles, what most people believe the Greek is explaining there is that if horses go through it, it splashes up to their bridles, okay? It's still going to be several feet. If it's going to splash that high, it's going to be several feet of blood for 180 miles around. We assume it's the city of Jerusalem that he's talking about, because that's where we're going to find out very shortly. That's where all the armies of the world are going to gather. But they seem to be very symbolic of what's going on at this time. Okay, let's go on to. If you got any questions, just go ahead and say about. Let's see. This is about the knife, the blood. Okay, let's take a look at the seven angels getting ready, and it's only eight verses long, so I'll just read it. I saw in heaven another great and marvelous sign: 7 angels with the 7 last plagues. Last, because with them God's wrath is completed. And I saw what looked like a sea of glass glowing with fire. And standing beside the sea, those who had been victorious over the beast and its image, and over the number of his name, they held harps given to them by God, and sang a song of God's servant Moses and of the Lamb. Great are and marvelous are your deeds, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, kings of the nations who will not fear you, Lord, and bring glory to your name. For you alone are holy. All nations will come and worship before you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. After this I looked, and I saw in heaven the temple, that is the tabernacle of the covenant law, and it was opened. Out of the temple came the 7 angels with the 7 plagues. They were dressed in clean, shining linen and wore golden sashes around their chests. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls filled with the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one could enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. So we've got basically the angels preparing to do these bowl judgments, the wrath of God, the final wrath of God. And they're coming out. Now, one of the characteristics of this is we saw heaven before in chapter 4 and 5, when we first looked at heaven and what was going on in heaven when John was taken up there. And the sea was clear. It was crystal clear. Okay, the sea that was before the throne. It was crystal clear. Now, it's no longer crystal clear. It's fire. There's fire there. Okay? And that's, most people say that's symbology that up until this point, God has been there with his arms open wide. Anybody can come to him. He accepts all. Okay? You just have to come through Jesus Christ and through the gospel. Okay? But he accepts everybody. That's who he is. But at this point, when the sea turns to fire, the wrath of God has started. And he has stopped accepting those to come to him, because that last angel, the first angel in the last chapter went out. He gave the gospel for one last time, and everybody had to make a decision. And if they made a decision to take the mark of the beast rather than to come to Christ, their decision has doomed them, okay? And so from that point on, after that harvest was made by Jesus Christ, that last harvest, everybody else on earth is going to be suffering the wrath of God. Okay, the victorious over the beast. How do you become victorious over the beast? Okay, you die at his hand, yeah, and you refuse to worship the beast. That's how you become victorious to the beast, is you refuse to worship the beast, and you sacrifice yourself for that, and that's what this is going to be like. Okay, then the four living creatures. We've met the four living creatures before. We had a lion, we had a flying eagle, we had an ox, and what was the last one? A human, a man. Okay, and they had what all over them? They had eyes all over them. Okay, and they were powerful cherubs, basically, cherubim that stood around the throne. Well, here these beasts are the ones that are handing out the bowls for the judgment to the angels. These living creatures, I shouldn't call them beasts, they're living creatures that serve God. Okay. Next chapter, 16, we go into and we talk about the bowl judgments now. And these are the last judgments. And what you're going to find, if you compare them to the trumpet judgments, you're going to find that they're almost exactly the same, in the same order, the same things, except all the trumpet judgments were generally 1/3 of the earth was affected. Okay? 1/3 of the earth was affected under the trumpets. But in the bowl judgments, it's the whole earth that's effective. It's all encompassing. So the first one was a warning. The trumpets were a warning. And then the bowl judgments are the full wrath of God. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the seven angels, "Go, pour out the seven bowls of God's wrath on the earth." The first angel went and poured out his bowl on the land, and ugly, festering sores broke out on the people who had the mark of the beast and who worshipped its image. Ugly, festering sores, a plague. Everybody that worships the beast is going to become very uncomfortable at this time. In fact, they're going to be in misery. Verse 3, the second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it turned into blood like that of a dead person, and every living thing in the sea died. Okay, remember in the trumpet, we had something happen to the sea, and 1/3 of all the creatures died in the sea, and 1/3 of the ships were sunk in the sea. But now here, the second angel, he doesn't talk about the ships at this time, but he pours something in and it becomes blood. It actually becomes blood. And it turned into blood, like that of a dead person. The other one said like blood. It became red like blood. Okay. This one says it becomes blood, and that every living thing in the sea dies. That's, if you talk to biologists, I mean, there's more living things in the sea than there are on land. Okay. Okay, the third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. Then I heard the angel in charge of the waters say, "You are just in these judgments, O Holy One, you who are and who were, for they have shed the blood of your holy people and your prophets. You have given them blood to drink as they deserve. And I heard the altar respond, "Yes, Lord God Almighty, true and just are your judgments." So all of the rivers and springs around the earth, all of them, become blood. And then that judgment from God is held up. And I think it's interesting that the altar's talking. If you remember what's under the altar from chapter 6, okay, it's the saints. It's the souls of the saints, the martyrs, were under the altar, and they were. And I don't know if they're the same people that are talking here, and they're confirming what God has done. They were certainly the ones that were looking for vengeance for their blood being shed. Okay. The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and the sun was allowed to scorch people with fire. They were seared by intense heat, and they cursed the name of God who had control over these plagues, but they refused to repent and glorify him. So the next one is poured out on the sun, and the sun seems to intensify. It becomes hotter, and everybody gets burned.
Global warming 3.0.
Yeah, there you go. It's except it's more extreme because everybody gets burned and blistered. They're going to have to hide themselves from the sun. So here you've got people who have the plague. I mean, they've got this festering, all these festering sores all over their body. They can no longer. It's going to be difficult for them to get water to drink because all the springs and the rivers around the world have turned into blood. Okay. So it's all the water that they're going to have to drink is going to have to be probably manufactured for them. And then now you've got the sun itself scorching everybody.
Compared to that giant solar storm that just came off the sun.
Did that happen just here not very long ago?
It's huge.
Is it still coming our way, or has it passed us now? Okay. No. Okay. There was a solar surge or a solar.
Solar storm, one of those huge explosions come off the sun.
Yeah.
Supposed to affect us, but I don't know whether it did or not.
Yeah.
We're worried about the electromagnetic part.
They always are because they have had solar storms which have actually knocked out when it happened back in the 1870s or 80s. It actually knocked out the telegraph system all over the country. Okay, so the people are not repenting, even though they're going through all this torture that's given to them directly by the hand of God. The fifth angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and its kingdom was plunged into darkness. People gnawed their tongues in agony and cursed God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, but they refused to repent of what they had done. Interesting, this brings up in my mind a very visual thing of an angel entering into the busy court of the Antichrist, and everybody looking at him. What are you doing? You know, people coming up to try to stop him. You know, you don't know where you are, and he just pushes them all away and walks up to the throne. And the Antichrist has to get up off his throne because he doesn't know what's going on, and he just calmly pours the bowl onto the throne, and whoom, everything on earth becomes dark. It's just showing how much going right to the beast and to his throne is showing how little control the Antichrist has of anything that's going on in the world right now. He needs to understand that God is God and he is not.
And it wasn't the top power angel.
No, I'm sure it wasn't. I mean, these angels, they're powerful. Yeah. So it's interesting. It's an interesting picture in my mind that shows the total inadequacy of the Antichrist being a god. Okay. The bowl is poured out on the beast's throne. All of the earth is plunged into darkness. The people of the earth curse God because of their pains and sores and do not repent. So it brings back and it talks about the pains and sores that they've got. So we know that all of these judgments are happening one right after the other, and they're still afflicted with the old issues when the new ones come. Okay? It's all happening very close together. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. And I saw three impure spirits that looked like frogs. They came out of the mouth of the dragon, who is Satan, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. So you've got the beast of the earth, which is the false prophet, and the beast of the sea, which is the Antichrist. All three of them have these spirits. They're like frogs coming out of their mouths. And they are demonic spirits that perform signs, and they go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them for the battle on the great day of God Almighty. Look, I come like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and remains clothed, so as not to go naked and be shamefully exposed. Then they gathered the kings together to the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. And that's basically, that is Megiddo Valley, okay? And it's the Jezreel Valley today in Israel. It's a huge valley, but it's just north. It's a little ways north of Jerusalem. Okay, so the bowl is poured out on the river Euphrates, and the river dries up. And then the kings of the east march their armies toward Israel, along it towards Israel. And many people believe, well, this is finally the Chinese army, maybe the Indian army with it, that are coming to being brought to Israel, probably to fight the Antichrist, maybe, and to try to take back the world from the Antichrist. The three frog-like spirits from the two beasts and the dragon, they spread throughout the world, and they summon everybody to the battle that's going to happen there in Israel. The seventh angel poured out his bowl in the air, and out of the temple came a loud voice from the temple saying, "It is done." Then there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake. No earthquake like it has ever occurred since mankind has been on earth. So tremendous was the quake. The great city split into three parts. We believe the great city that they're talking about here is Jerusalem. Okay? It splits into three different parts. And the cities of the nations collapse. So all cities around the world collapse because of this huge earthquake. God remembered Babylon the Great and gave her the cup filled with the wine of the fury of his wrath. Every island fled away. The mountains could not be found. From the sky, huge hailstones, each weighing about 100 pounds, fell on people. And they cursed God on the account of the plague of hail because the plague was so terrible. Okay? A massive earthquake that splits up Jerusalem but actually destroys all the other major cities on earth. Okay? Especially including Babylon. Babylon, whichever city that is, and we get to it here, we'll talk to it. It gets destroyed at this time. This is the downfall of Babylon, the destruction of Babylon. And that is the city of the Antichrist. It gets destroyed. And then we have, on top of that, we have huge hailstones, okay, that seem to be targeting people. And you think it's, I mean, I don't know, has anybody been pelted by hail before? Yes. I have. It stings, okay? It depends on how big it is. Sometimes it's just an annoyance. Other times it really stings. Quarter size or golf ball size, you know? And it dimples everything. There was a hailstone, the largest hailstone on history, in this country at least, was a 200-pound hailstone that hit a car going along on a highway in Kansas, and it knocked the engine block out of the car. It hit the hood, knocked the engine block out of the car. And I think that happened in the late 80s or something like that. But that's the type of damage these things can do when we're talking about 100-pound hailstones. How much is a 100-pound hailstone is going to be like this? It's going to be like getting hit with a huge rock. From the atmosphere. Yeah. And so, they seem to be pretty accurate. And because people are, you can't get away from them. A hailstone like that will come right through your roof. Okay, it'll destroy your house. Okay. All cities fall into destruction. Islands go underwater. Mountains fall down. It says the mountains cannot be found. I mean, this is the shaking of the world that is something that's never happened before. Okay? It's like God takes the world and shakes it, and all the mountains fall down. In fact, in the end, if you go back to Zechariah 14, he's talking about the day of the Lord. He says that Zion is going to be lifted up, and it will be the highest mountain on earth. And I think it's in Zechariah 14. Okay. Yeah, and so if you've got the shaking going on, all these other mountains are falling down, okay, it may not be that Jerusalem has to be lifted up that high to be the highest mountain on earth. So this is interesting, and you're talking about incredible tectonic forces here that are at work. Okay. In the end, people are still cursing God. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. We're not going to spend a lot of time on, there are 2 chapters here that talk about Babylon. I just wanted to pull some things out of them so that we can see a little bit about the character of Babylon and where it is, possibly, which city it is. Okay, what is Babylon? We know it's symbolized here in chapter 17 as the woman that rides the beast. Okay, the beast we know is the Antichrist, right? Babylon is the prostitute that rides the beast. Okay, and then at the very end, in verse 9, this calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. Does anybody know of a city in the world that sits on 7 hills? Rome. That's the city that we know of as the city that sits on 7 hills. And if you're good classist, you can actually name the hills: the Palatine, the Equinine, and I don't remember them all right off the top of my head. But anyway, it's sitting on the 7 hills, and so a lot of people believe that Babylon the Great is going to be Rome. But we don't know that, okay? This is kind of a hint that direction. Okay, the woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. So this is where the Antichrist has his government, and he rules over the earth from there. And it's where everybody comes to pay homage to the Antichrist. Okay, the next question, what kinds of activity happened there? And in these verses, you can see, then the angel carried me away in the spirit of wilderness, and there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had the 7 heads and the 10 horns. We know that beast is the Antichrist. We've already met him. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. And the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire, for God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purposes by agreeing to hand over the beast to their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. Interesting symbology here. It seems like even though it is his city, the Antichrist city, and all the world, it has an international flavor. People from all over the world, all nations and tongues, are going to be represented there. And so it has an international flavor, and there is money coming from all over the world to build this city and to keep it up and to keep it going. It's still a place, for some reason there's an antipathy between the beast, the Antichrist, and the city that he's made. And that's what seems to be talking about. And he will actually take action to keep that city under control, because the city seems to be a cesspool of all the evil in the world. They all come there and they play. It's a place of hedonism, of sinful practices, and it seems like they get out of control, and so the Antichrist despises it. But the other thing it says is that God put it into the Antichrist's heart, even though the Antichrist we know is controlled by Satan at this time. He puts it into the Antichrist's heart to even punish the city. The other thing is it talks about is, I think it's in the one before, I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. Are they going to be making a spectacle of the Christians that are caught and are brought here and executed publicly, or what is going to be happening? But it seems that Babylon itself, the city, is going to be celebrating in the destruction of the people of God. They're going to be drunk with the blood of God's holy people, which to me says that they are going to be active in killing off the Christians. So that's a little bit about Babylon the Great. It's a interesting. And all of chapter 18 is about the doom and the destruction of Babylon, that city. Now we saw that city is going to be destroyed in the earthquake. Okay, but this is the first part of it is a lament over the fallen Babylon, and then a warning to escape Babylon's judgment, threefold woe over Babylon's fall, the finality of Babylon's doom. And it's interesting that the John has spent basically he spends 2.5 chapters talking just about the destruction of Babylon the Great. Questions? Anything else that we need to talk about a little bit more? Got questions about, Ben?
Well, you mentioned something earlier about, I think it was in chapter 16 or around there, about the marriage of the Lamb.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But doesn't that not occur till chapter 19?
It is in chapter 19. That's when it's talked about, yes. We know that marriage feasts at the time, from the time of Israel took 7 days. We don't know how long this one is going to last. most people that are, we think from the way that the church itself is talked about in the Bible, the church is the bride of Christ. And so we are the ones that are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb because we're his bride. And it says in 19, it says, blessed are all those, of course, that are. And so many people believe that if we're raptured early, prior to the Great Tribulation, that the Christians are going to be there in heaven with Christ, okay? And we're going to be involved in the marriage supper of the Lamb, and that supper may be taking place all throughout that 7-year period. We'll be feasting while the rest of the world is being judged by God. That's what they're saying. We do not have direct evidence in Revelation as to exactly how long the feast is going to take. But after chapter 3, he spends the first 3 chapters talking about the church. And then at 4 and after, the church is never mentioned again in Revelation. And that's why many people believe that the church is going to be raptured before all these other things are taking place, because the church disappears from off the earth.
It just makes sense. A loving Heavenly Father,
Mm-hmm.
why would he bring destruction on his children?
Right. And even allow his children to go through the great evil that's going to come about because of the Antichrist.
Quote, I'm a sinful father, and I want to protect this kid.
Yeah. Right. And it's the same way with us. God has said that we are children of love, not children of wrath. And that's our hope. Okay? We read what goes on in Revelation to the whole world, and we certainly don't want to be involved in that in any way, shape, or form, because we know the power of God. We know his control, and we know when he is reigning, the rain comes down on the righteous and the evil. Okay? For now. If he wanted to be selective, he could be. Okay, but we know that the persecution is not just going to be coming from God on these folks. It's not just the wrath of God, it's the wrath of the Antichrist and the wrath of Satan that's going to be going after the church and after Israel. So, the other thing that we see through the day of the Lord, and talking about that in prophecy, is that's all the time that God is dealing with the children of Israel. He's dealing with the Jews. He's not dealing with the Christians necessarily. He's bringing them to himself. They become Christians, but he's bringing them back to himself. And so many of us believe that the church is going to be taken out of the way. Now, there's other things that are going to happen, and we know from other things in the Bible that there's the Bema seat and the crowns that we receive once we get there. Those things are going to be happening. And many people believe, well, those things are happening behind the scenes in heaven while all this is going on. We are being given crowns for the things that we've done here. We're given the Bema Seat judgments and all that kind of stuff. It's not. It's just for Christians. It's not for anybody else. And so.
There's most of the book of Revelation about God restoring his program with Israel.
Right, right. It's about God dealing with the nation of Israel rather than about God dealing with Christians and the church. It seems like the church is gone. But you have other people that believe, even other people in our church, that believe that the rapture is going to take place at when Jesus Christ, just prior to Jesus Christ coming in the second judgment, that when he first comes down, we're going to be taken up, and we're going to be given our new bodies, and then we're going to come with him back to earth, with him as his holy ones, the army that's with him when he comes back and takes over the earth, and then all that is going to happen at the same time. There's people that believe that here, and there's great theologians that believe that. So it's when we talked about the rapture, We don't know. The Bible is not specific about exactly when the rapture is going to take place. And I happen to be a believer in the pre-tribulation rapture. Now, I have had other beliefs in the past about when the rapture was going to take place. But we don't know explicitly. I believe that the Bible tells us in several different places that we are going to be spared the time of the testing in the end.
Well, I think Revelation 4 kind of hints that it's going to be before all.
Yeah. It's that time when it hints when John is taken up to heaven that that's the exact same time that we're going to be taken up to heaven too when we're doing that. Yeah.
So you're saying that John could symbolize the church?
Right. Yeah. When you read it, the doors opened in heaven, and then he says, "Come up here," and John comes up, and that symbolizes the time when the rapture is going to take place. That's chapter 4, verse 1 and 2, I think. Because John is the church. He's part of the church. He was certainly one of the church planners, and he was active in the church in Ephesus. We know, all the way up through his death. He was the only surviving apostle. For like 2 decades, he was the only surviving apostle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's chapter 3, right? Chapter 3. Yeah, that it says when he's talking about the Philadelphia church that that people that are faithful to him would be spared.
Well, he tells the church of Sardis that, and then he tells Philadelphia that they'll be kept in the hour of testing.
Right. And I believe that is one of the best evidences in the Bible that we are going to be taken out prior to the Great Tribulation. Yeah. That's one of those scriptures that I hold on to.
Plus the fact that, as you say, once the tribulation starts, the church is never mentioned again.
Right.
Until chapter 19.
You would think that the church now, if the church is 3 million people large or whatever, 30 million people large or more, if you take, it depends on how you count it, but I mean, it could be as much as hundreds of millions of people. You would think that it would be mentioned in Revelation after that point, but it's not. Yeah. Other questions?
Mark, we need to remind people that we're not having any class on December 27th.
Right.
Or January 3rd.
In fact, this series is probably the next class will be the last class in Revelation. We'll finish out Revelation. I'm going to wrap it up. Yeah, we're going through these last chapters pretty quick, but I think we'll have plenty to talk about. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. All right. We're not meeting on when was it? December 27th and January 3rd. Those 2 Sundays we are not going to be meeting, and we'll be doing something else when we come back in January, the first weekend of January. We're what? Okay, the second weekend in January. That's when we're going to be finishing up. We kind of put this eschatology series in. We were working on John before we got hit by COVID and everything else, and we're going to be finishing up John then, coming the beginning of January. We were right at about the 11th chapter with Lazarus. So we did a little bit of that online too. We went a little farther than that online, but a lot of people could not participate in that. So, okay. Let's go ahead and close in a word of prayer.